a 65-year-old widow, a wedding under an ancient oak tree, and a body buried right beneath it. Do you believe a mother in her golden years could be a killer? Helen Moore had never dated anyone since her husband died of cancer 15 years ago, until she met Ryan Carter, a charming 27-year-old barista, during a quiet trip to Arizona. They laughed, they danced, they even got married. But 5 months later, Ryan disappeared. And when his body was found in Helen's backyard, people asked, was this love, or was it manipulation? Was Helen a victim of romance, or part of something darker? This isn't just a story about love. It's about how far a mother will go when the man she loves turns into a threat. Let's begin. Helen hadn't fought with her daughter in over 2 decades. But that changed the day Lauren saw Ryan for the second time. It was a Sunday afternoon in May, warm and sticky. Helen had invited her daughter over for iced tea and lemon tart, hoping for a quiet catch-up. But when Ryan stepped out of the kitchen in a white button-down and said, "Hey, Lauren," with that perfect barista smile of his, everything changed. Lauren didn't answer. She just stared. Then she picked up her purse and said, "I'll call you later." She didn't call. That evening, Helen's phone lit up with a message. "Mom, are you serious with this? We need to talk. Alone. When the people you love hate the person you love." Lauren was 43, a senior account manager at a downtown bank. Recently divorced. Tired. Suspicious. She showed up at Helen's house the next day with a stack of paperwork in her arms and a nod in her voice. "I Googled him," Lauren said, laying down printouts. "He's changed jobs 6 times in 4 years. He never finished college. And Mom, he's younger than me." Helen folded her hands, breathing slowly. "Lauren, he makes me happy. Is that really so hard to understand?" Lauren blinked. "Happy? He's a gold digger in a pressed shirt." That word, gold digger. It echoed in the living room like an insult flung in church. Helen stood up. "That's unfair." "No, what's unfair is watching my mother throw herself at some kid who's obviously using her." They stared at each other for a moment, 2 women, 2 generations, carrying 2 different kinds of heartbreak. "I gave up everything for this family," Helen said softly. "Your father was the only man I ever loved. I was there when he took his last breath. You think I don't know how fragile happiness is? Then don't let some stranger walk in and fake it," Lauren snapped. Helen hadn't meant to yell, but her voice cracked, louder than she'd intended. "You're bitter because your marriage failed. Don't take that out on me." Silence. Lauren's face fell like glass hitting pavement. "Wow, you really think that?" She grabbed her purse again. Same motion, same finality. But this time she turned at the door. "You want to marry a child? Fine, but don't expect me to smile through it." And she left. That night, Helen sat at the kitchen table with Ryan. The lemon tart was untouched. "She hates me," he said quietly. "She doesn't know you," Helen replied. But something in her voice lacked conviction. Ryan reached across the table. His hands were warm, familiar. "I'm not here for your money, Helen. I'm here for you." Helen smiled, but in the back of her mind, Lauren's voice repeated itself like a warning siren. "He's younger than me. He's using you." She shook it off, poured more tea, forced a change of subject. The next Sunday, Helen went to church alone. She didn't pray. She just sat in the back pew, staring at the stained glass, wondering when love had become a battlefield and when her daughter became the enemy. She remembered the first time she held Lauren, tiny and pink and fierce. She remembered school plays and college tears. She remembered being her hero. Now, her hero cape was in the trash, not because she'd fallen in love, but because she'd chosen it, over approval. And deep down, Helen wasn't sure if that made her strong or just selfish. Have you ever fallen in love, only to lose someone else because of it? Let us know in the comments. Because sometimes, love doesn't divide us. It just shows us where the cracks already were. They got married on a Saturday, late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything golden. Helen stood barefoot in the grass, her toenails painted soft pink. She hadn't worn a dress like this in years, flowy, with a ribbon that fluttered when she moved. Ryan waited under the oak tree, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a simple white rose. There were no rows of chairs, just a half-moon of friends, Maggie from book club, Paul and Jean from church, and old Mrs. Camden who lived 3 houses down. No Lauren, no Matthew, and from Ryan's side, no one. Helen had asked about it once, weeks ago. He smiled like he didn't care. "I burned those bridges a long time ago," he said. "This is my new family now." She let it go. Maybe some people start over for a reason. The oak tree had been there longer than she'd been alive. Her husband, her first one, Jack, used to hang wind chimes on its branches. Every fall, Matthew used to rake its leaves into enormous piles and jump in, laughing until he coughed. Lauren once tied her diary with twine and hid it inside a hollow in the trunk. This tree had seen her joy, her pain, her growing old. Now it witnessed something new. The officiant was a friend of a friend, a retired actor with a soothing voice and no judgment in his eyes. When he said, "You may kiss the bride," Ryan dipped her gently, a touch theatrical, and kissed her like they were in their 20s. The guests clapped. Maggie even cried. They toasted champagne in mismatched glasses. Someone played, at last, on a speaker. Helen danced in the grass, her hair coming loose, her heart strangely light. There was laughter. There was joy. For the first time in years, Helen felt seen. Wanted, not pitted. Later that evening, when the guests had left and the sky turned a sleepy kind of blue, Ryan lit candles along the fence. Helen sat on the old swing with her knees pulled to her chest, watching him. "You did all this," she whispered. He handed her a glass of wine. "For you. But you didn't invite anyone," she said gently. "Not even one friend." He sat beside her. "I don't really have people like that. I moved around a lot. Got used to being solo." Helen nodded. She'd known people like that before. Drifters. Wounded souls who didn't collect attachments. It wasn't strange, just sad. "You have me now," she said. He touched her hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. "That's all I've ever needed." Inside, the house smelled like vanilla cake and something floral. The music was soft, playing from a playlist Helen didn't recognize. Ryan had put it together. "I added some jazz. And one classical piece, like your late husband liked." She froze, just for a second, then smiled. "You remembered." "Of course I did." They danced in the living room. Slow. No shoes. No rules. That night, lying beside him, Helen stared at the ceiling fan spinning quietly above. She thought about Lauren, wondered if she would ever forgive her, wondered if she should have waited longer, if maybe love in your 60s required more caution than courage. But the thought passed, because when Ryan pulled her close, kissed her shoulder, and whispered, "Mrs. Carter," she laughed. It sounded strange, sure, but also sweet. The next morning, the oak tree still stood tall outside the window, casting its shadow across the garden. Helen made pancakes. Ryan made coffee. They sat in silence, eating, legs touching under the table. Then Helen asked again, softly this time. "No one? Really? Not even an old roommate? A cousin?" Ryan looked up, the smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Helen, I don't need anyone from before. I've got a second chance now, and I'm not wasting it trying to impress people who never gave a damn." She nodded. That made sense. Kind of. Still, in all the photos from that day, the same imbalance showed. One side of the ceremony full of aging smiles, wrinkled hands raised in cheer. The other side, empty grass and swaying branches. And in the center, Helen, glowing, beautiful, holding hands with a man half her age, a man with no past in sight. That night, before bed, she tucked the photos into a wooden drawer, closed it gently. She didn't want to look at them yet. Maybe later, when everything felt more real. At first, Helen thought it was just love. Ryan liked to know where she was. He'd text if she stayed too long at the grocery store. Call if her morning walk went past 30 minutes. He said it was because he worried, because he cared. "It's not about control," he told her one afternoon, when she came home late from book club and found him pacing in the kitchen. "I just need to know you're safe. You're not 25 anymore, Helen." She laughed it off, hugged him, told herself this was what a younger man meant. More energy, more intensity, more presence. It was flattering in a way, but the changes came slowly, like fog rolling in. He offered to help with her banking. Said the online stuff looked confusing. "Why don't I just keep track of the bills for you?" He'd said one morning over eggs. "That way you don't have to worry." It sounded sweet, practical, until one day she realized she hadn't logged into her own account in over a month. And when she did, quietly, one evening while Ryan was out buying wine, she noticed small withdrawals. $80 here, $120 there. Each time labeled vaguely, supplies, errands, miscellaneous. Nothing big, nothing damning, just odd. When she asked, Ryan chuckled. "That's all stuff I got for us, babe. Groceries, home repairs, little things. You're not keeping a spreadsheet on your husband, are you?" Helen smiled. but something inside her stomach pulled tight. It wasn't just the money. It was the way he always had her phone. "Let me update your calendar," he'd say. "I'll add your doctor appointment. Don't forget your hair next Friday." He remembered everything, but she stopped remembering things herself. Her schedule became his. She missed lunch with Maggie twice in 1 month because Ryan said we had plans. She forgot about choir practice. Ryan said it clashed with dinner. "I already thawed the fish," he explained. Even her garden, her sacred, quiet place, started to feel distant. Ryan insisted on trimming the hedges himself. Said the tools were too heavy for her now. "I'm not fragile," she told him one day. He kissed her forehead. "You're precious." That's not the same thing. And maybe he was right. But the house felt smaller now. Tighter. Like air going stale in a closed room. Then came the phone call. It was past midnight. Helen had gone to bed early after feeling lightheaded. Ryan said it was probably just dehydration. He made her drink a full glass of water and tucked her in with a blanket, then kissed her cheek and went back downstairs. She woke around 2:17 a.m. and realized the bed beside her was empty. At first, she thought maybe he was making tea. But then she heard it, his voice, low and fast, coming from the back porch. She sat up, moved quietly. The porch door was slightly ajar. She peeked through. He was pacing, barefoot, phone pressed tight to his ear. "I told you not to call me at this hour," he hissed. "No, it's not a good time." "She's asleep." Pause. "No, I haven't yet. I said I'm handling it." Another pause. Then, sharper. "I know what I'm doing." Helen stepped back, quietly closed the bedroom door, climbed into bed, heart drumming like a trapped bird. She didn't ask him about it the next morning. He brought her breakfast, toast, poached eggs, berries. He smiled like nothing happened. She watched him pour coffee, steady hands, clean t-shirt. Not a wrinkle, not a crack. He sat beside her, kissed her cheek. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. A few days later, Lauren came by unannounced. Helen hadn't seen her since the wedding. The silence had stretched, tight and cold, like a piano wire no one dared to touch. Lauren walked in holding a reusable grocery bag and a fake smile. "I brought you that herbal tea you like," she said. They sat on the couch, chatted about the weather. Safe things. Nothing about love. Nothing about Ryan. But before she left, Lauren looked her mother in the eye. "You good?" she asked. Helen hesitated. "Yes," she said. Then, after a pause, "He's just protective." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Protective like a dog, or like a cage?" Helen didn't answer. That night, Helen lay in bed watching the ceiling. Ryan was next to her, scrolling on his phone, face lit by the glow. She thought about the call again. The edge in his voice. The way he said, "Handling it." "Handling what?" She turned to him. "Who were you talking to the other night?" He didn't look up. "What night?" "Tuesday. You were on the porch." He finally glanced over. Smiled lightly. "Just a buddy from Phoenix. Some old debts I was helping him with." "You worry too much." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's not your stress, babe." He set his phone down, rolled over to kiss her. "You married me so I could take care of you, remember?" She nodded. But something inside her said, "No, that's not why." A week later, she found her checkbook in a different drawer. She hadn't moved it. And her car keys were suddenly hanging by the back door. Ryan said it was more convenient that way. When she tried to reset her email password, just because she couldn't remember the last time she logged in, it wouldn't let her. "Need help?" Ryan asked from across the room, appearing so fast it startled her. "No," she said quickly. "I've got it." He stood there for a moment, watching, then smiled. "Okay, just let me know." That afternoon, Helen sat under the oak tree. Alone. She listened to the birds, to the wind, to the soft creak of the swing beside her. For years, this was her place of peace. Now, even the tree felt different, like it was listening. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I don't know what's happening." And the breeze didn't answer. But it didn't have to. The rain came suddenly that night. Not a soft drizzle, but a steady, cold pour that rattled the gutters and smeared the windows with streaks. Helen was folding laundry in the living room, the TV humming something forgettable in the background, when she heard the knock. 3 sharp raps. Not urgent. Just certain. She opened the door, towel still in hand, and there he was. Matthew. Her youngest. 35 now, but still carrying that same quiet sadness in his eyes. Taller than she remembered. Leaner. His jeans soaked, his hoodie clinging to his frame. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well in years. "Hi, Mom," he said, Voice low. Helen blinked. Matthew. He nodded. She didn't ask why. She just pulled him into a hug and didn't let go for almost a full minute. Matthew had always been different. As a boy, he rarely spoke unless asked. He hated loud noises and crowds. Spent hours drawing trees and faces in his sketchpad. After Jack died, he grew even quieter, withdrawing into himself like a turtle into its shell. Therapy helped some. Time helped more. But eventually, he left. Moved to Portland. Stopped calling. Helen didn't blame him. Not really. Some wounds you have to walk away from to survive. And yet, there he was now, eating her chicken casserole like he'd never left. Ryan walked in halfway through dinner, surprised to see an extra plate. You must be Matt, he said, extending a hand with that same practice charm. Matthew looked at him. Didn't shake. Just nodded. Matthew. Helen's eyes darted between them. Ryan laughed it off. Strong and silent? Huh? I like that. Matthew didn't smile. Later, while Ryan went to get dessert, Matthew leaned in. Why is he living here? Helen paused. Because we're married. Matthew's brow furrowed. He seems off. Helen placed her napkin down. He's good to me. Is he? She stared at her son. The same boy who once cried for 3 hours after accidentally stepping on a caterpillar. The boy who didn't speak for 2 weeks after his father died. Matt, she said softly, I know it's hard to understand. He didn't answer. Just looked toward the hallway where Ryan had gone. His jaw tightened. I don't like him. Dessert was apple pie. Helen's favorite. Ryan sliced it at the table, humming Sinatra under his breath. He poured everyone decaf coffee and joked about needing to earn favorite son-in-law status. No offense to your daughter's ex, he said, grinning. But I think I've got this in the bag. Helen chuckled politely. Matthew stared at his coffee. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan leaned back in his chair and said, You know, if I die, I want to be buried right out there under that oak tree. At least I'd finally be useful, some good compost. Helen laughed, nervous. Don't joke like that. But before the chuckle faded, Matthew slammed his palm on the table. The dishes jumped. Coffee sloshed. The room froze. Don't talk about dying here, Matthew said, voice shaking. Not in this house. Not like that. Ryan's smile dropped. Hey, man, it was just a joke. It's not funny. Helen stood. Okay. Let's all calm down now. Matthew pushed his chair back. I'm going to bed. And without another word, he disappeared upstairs, footsteps heavy, deliberate. Ryan stared after him. What the hell was that? Helen gathered the plates in silence. They didn't speak much the next morning. Matthew had made coffee before anyone else woke. He sat in the corner of the kitchen, sketching something in a small leather-bound notebook. When Helen came down, he looked up briefly, then returned to his drawing. He's hiding something, he said quietly. Helen poured herself tea. Matt, please. He watches you like he's keeping score. She paused. You haven't seen me in 5 years. You don't get to come back and act like you know my life. He looked at her, eyes calm but firm. I know how fear looks on you. You wear it in your shoulders. You've been shrinking, Mom. Helen swallowed. He's not perfect. But I'm not afraid. Matthew didn't push further. He just closed his notebook and said, I'm staying a few days. That okay? She nodded. Over the next week, the tension thickened. Ryan tried to be civil, offering coffee, suggesting board games, trying to spark small talk. But Matthew remained polite and cold. Not hostile. Just present. Watching. Listening. Helen felt like she was walking a tightrope between them. One morning, she caught Ryan staring out the window at Matthew in the garden. He's strange, he said. He's thoughtful, Helen replied. Ryan scoffed. He gives me the creeps. Later that day, Helen found Matthew kneeling by the oak tree, touching the roots gently, like they were old friends. She stepped outside. You used to draw that tree every summer. Matthew nodded. Still do. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, He's not who you think he is. Helen's voice dropped. What are you saying? I don't have proof. Not yet. But something's wrong. You feel it. I know you do. She looked at the branches swaying overhead. The wind felt colder than usual. That night, it rained again. Ryan was on the phone again, this time in the garage, voice low, pacing like he did before. Helen didn't listen this time. She didn't have to. She turned on the porch light and stood by the window, watching the drops slide down the glass. Matthew came beside her, arms folded. He's planning something, he said. Helen didn't argue. Because for the first time, a part of her wondered if her son might be right. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Helen noticed the silence. The kind that doesn't hum with routine, but rings with absence. The coffee pot was full. The bed beside her still rumpled, but cold. Ryan's shoes were by the door. His phone, gone. But his wallet was still on the entry table. She called out once. Then again. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. No shaving kit missing. His jacket hung on the hook by the door. And the car? Still parked in the garage, clean from the rain the night before. Helen stood in the kitchen, holding her mug with both hands, waiting for a sound. A door creak. A flush. A "Hey babe, just stepped out back." But the house answered only with the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. At first, she thought maybe he'd gone for a walk. A run, even. But Ryan never ran. He said it was bad for his knees. By noon, she'd checked the neighborhood, knocked on Mrs. Camden's door, walked the whole block. Nothing. She waited until evening before saying anything to Matthew. He was in the garden again, sitting by the oak tree, sketchpad on his lap. He didn't look up when she spoke. "Have you seen Ryan?" "No." He didn't leave a note. His phone's gone, but his wallet's here. Car's still in the garage. Matthew paused, then flipped a page in his notebook. Maybe he just needed to disappear. Helen frowned. What does that mean? He finally looked at her. Calm. Still. Some people disappear because they're scared. Some because they're guilty. Some just because they can. She stared at him. Matthew, this is serious. I know. She waited for more. An opinion. A reaction. But he went back to his drawing. The next morning, Ryan was still gone. Helen called the hospital. Then the sheriff's office. They told her to wait 48 hours unless she believed there was foul play. She didn't know what she believed. By day 2, she sat on the edge of the bed, clutching his jacket. She finally picked up the phone and dialed 911. I'd like to report a missing person, she said, voice barely steady. The officer came that afternoon, a woman named Sanders, polite and methodical. She took notes, walked through the house, checked the garage, the closets, the phone records. No recent withdrawals, she said, flipping through the bank statements Helen had printed. No flagged purchases, no calls after Monday night. Helen nodded. I checked too. Officer Sanders tilted her head. Did you two fight recently? Helen hesitated. Not exactly. But something felt off. She didn't answer, just looked at the floor. The officer handed her a card. If you remember anything unusual, call me directly. That evening, Helen sat across from Matthew at the dining table. They ate in silence. The house felt heavier now, like its walls knew something it wouldn't say. After a while, Helen asked, Aren't you worried? Matthew took a sip of water. No. Why not? He looked at her. Because sometimes, people leaving is the best thing that can happen. She froze. Matthew. He didn't blink. You were afraid of him. You just couldn't admit it. That's not true, isn't it? Helen stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't know what you're talking about. Matthew remained seated. He was controlling you. He was lying. And deep down, you knew it. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. There are people who disappear, and we search the woods for them. And there are people who disappear, and we finally sleep through the night. She looked at him, trembling. Did you do something? Matthew didn't answer. The next morning, the sheriff returned. Still no leads, she said. We'll expand the search perimeter. Run his name through interstate logs. If he used his phone, we'll know soon. Helen nodded, gave her a polite thank you. After she left, Helen went to the garage, stood by the car, opened the trunk. Empty. No shovel. No tarp. Nothing strange. She turned to the tool shelf. Everything looked untouched. Except one hammer. The small one. Ryan's favorite for hanging shelves. It was gone. She didn't remember moving it. But maybe she just forgot. She walked back into the house. Found Matthew at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. Did you take anything from the garage? She asked. He shook his head. Did you touch Ryan's tools? He dried a plate slowly. No. Helen stared at his back. Did you argue with him? That night he disappeared. Matthew turned around, calm. We didn't talk that night. She didn't believe him. And he knew she didn't. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening for sounds that wouldn't come. In the dark, every creak sounded like a footstep, every gust of wind like a whisper. She turned to the empty space beside her. There was no note, no goodbye, no explanation, just absence. And in its place, questions that multiplied. In the morning, she went out to the oak tree. Matthew was already there, as if waiting. She stood beside him, arms crossed. If you know something, she said, you have to tell me. He looked at her, eyes tired. I know you loved him. I did. But you also knew something was wrong. She didn't deny it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden token, the kind Ryan used to carry in his jacket. He dropped this the day before he left. Helen took it in her palm. It felt cold. Familiar. I don't know what happened to him, Matthew said. But I do know he wasn't planning on staying. Helen looked at the tree, the roots winding deep beneath the soil, the branches arching like arms overhead. She whispered, maybe some things don't want to be found. And for a moment, neither of them said another word. The call came just after 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. Helen was standing at the sink, rinsing a coffee cup, when the knock came as sharp, loud, unmistakable. She saw the sheriff's cruiser through the window, and something inside her clenched. She opened the door with damp hands. It was Officer Sanders. 2 more uniforms stood behind her, grim-faced. Mrs. Carter, Sanders said, we need you to come outside. Helen followed them barefoot. There, in the backyard, under the old oak tree, yellow tape had been stretched into a loose square. 2 officers were standing by the base of the tree. One held a shovel. Another was bent over a patch of dirt that looked wrong. Too smooth. Too deliberate. A soft breeze shifted the leaves above. We received an anonymous tip, Sanders said. And when we checked the neighbor's security footage, we saw someone digging back here. Several nights in a row. Helen didn't answer. She couldn't. Sanders continued. Ma'am, is that your son? Helen looked at the blurry stills on the deputy's phone. Grainy, black and white. A man with a shovel. Slouched posture. Moving slow, methodical. Under moonlight. It was Matthew. Her knees went weak. The body was found 6 feet deep. Wrapped in a blue tarp, buried with the same white button-down shirt Ryan had worn the night of their wedding. There was no sign of trauma. No blood. No weapon. But he was dead. Dead, and buried in the very spot they had danced together under fairy lights. Helen stood back, trembling, as the paramedics lifted the body onto a stretcher. Her hands covered her mouth. She didn't cry. Not yet. Matthew was inside, quiet. Still. He let them handcuff him without a word. As they let him out the front door, Helen reached for him. Matthew, she whispered. What did you do? He looked at her, not scared. Not angry. Just tired. I didn't plan it, he said. It just happened. And then they put him in the car. The news spread fast. Neighbors whispered. The church ladies stopped calling. Maggie left 2 voicemails and then fell silent. Helen sat on the couch for hours that day, staring at the wall. The TV was on, muted. A news ticker scrolled across the bottom with words like suspect, investigation, found buried. She didn't move, just held Ryan's old sweater to her chest. She tried to remember the last words he said to her. Was it something about tea? Or a joke about the neighbor's dog? She couldn't remember. The next morning, Sanders returned with more questions. We're trying to establish a timeline, she said. We believe the body was buried roughly 2 weeks before you filed the missing person report. That's unusual. Helen nodded numbly. I didn't know. Are you sure? She flinched. I thought, maybe he left. Maybe he got scared. You didn't notice the digging? It's a big yard, Helen said. And I wasn't sleeping well. He told me he was sketching. Sanders watched her carefully. Mrs. Carter, do you believe your son killed your husband? Helen stared out the window. I believe something went wrong. And I believe he tried to protect me. Maybe in the wrong way. Protect you from what? Helen closed her eyes. From the truth. That night, she sat under the oak tree. They'd cleared away the dirt, but the earth was still raw, freshly turned. She could smell it, wet soil and memory. She placed a blanket on the grass and sat there in silence, listening to the wind weave through the branches. She thought about their wedding. The mismatched chairs. The pie. The dancing. She remembered how light she'd felt. But now, in that same spot, everything felt heavy, thick, like time had folded in on itself. She whispered into the air, did I know? And that was the question that haunted her. Because maybe she did. Maybe a part of her, deep down, had seen the signs. The late-night phone calls. The secrets. The fake smiles. The hollow explanations. Maybe she had chosen to ignore the shadow in his voice because she was afraid of losing that one last shot at happiness. Or maybe she had known something darker. That Ryan wasn't just difficult. He was dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, she'd chosen not to ask. 2 days later, she visited Matthew in county jail. They gave her 10 minutes. She sat across the thick glass, holding the cold plastic phone. Matthew looked thin, pale, but steady. I didn't mean to kill him, he said. Helen's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. I believe you. I confronted him. I told him to leave. He laughed, said you'd never believe me, that if I pushed too hard, he'd turn you against me. Helen gripped the phone tighter. He said he put you in a care home. Said he already had the papers. She closed her eyes. Matthew. He grabbed my arm. I pushed him. He fell. Hit his head. He didn't wake up. Silence. I panicked, he said. Helen pressed her forehead against the glass. You should have told me. He looked up. Would you have believed me? She couldn't answer. That night, she dreamed of the tree. In her dream, the branches reached down like arms, wrapping around her shoulders. The roots pulsed under her feet, warm and alive. Ryan stood at the edge of the garden, smiling. But behind his smile, his eyes were empty. She woke up gasping. In the weeks that followed, the backyard grew quiet. No birds. No wind chimes. Helen avoided the tree, covered it with a blue tarp, planted daisies at its base, but they never bloomed. She stayed inside mostly, watching rain slip down the windows, reading old journals, looking for moments she could rewrite. Sometimes she whispered to herself in the kitchen, in the laundry room, late at night. Did I know? Did I choose not to know? Or did love blind me into silence? And every time, the answer was the same. Maybe. But the truth didn't live in the answer. It lived in the ache that followed. The walls were beige, the floor too clean. Everything smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. Helen waited at the visitor's window, hands folded in her lap, sweater sleeves pulled over her palms. It was her third visit to see Matthew since the arraignment. Each time, it felt like the hours stretched longer. Each time, she wasn't sure what to say. This time, Matthew looked different. Not broken, not angry, just quiet. He sat down across from her, picked up the receiver, and gave her a small nod. She picked up hers. How are you? She asked. He shrugged. They've got me on suicide watch. Every hour, someone checks. Even while I sleep. Helen's throat tightened. I'm sorry. I'm not. She didn't respond. Let the silence settle between them. Then he spoke. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Helen held the phone tighter. Then how was it supposed to go? I just wanted to scare him. Shake him enough that he'd pack his things and leave. Helen looked down at her lap. But he didn't. Matthew leaned forward. He laughed at me. Told me I was weak. That I'd always be the messed up kid who couldn't even hold down a job. He said I'd never protect anyone, not even my own mother. Helen's eyes burned. He said you were signing over the house. That you didn't even realize it. Her breath caught. What? I found the papers in his desk drawer. He forged your signature on half of them. Others, you might have signed without reading. He had your passwords, Mom, your bank, your will. He wasn't just planning to take your money, he was planning to take you. Helen closed her eyes. I told him to stop. Told him if he touched you, I'd make him regret it. He paused. Then he grabbed me. Just like Dad used to. Helen flinched. I shoved him, Matthew said, voice low. Hard. He stumbled backward and hit his head on the stone path. I thought he'd get up. He didn't. Helen couldn't speak. I panicked, he said. I didn't know what else to do. I kept thinking, if she sees this, it'll kill her. She whispered, so you buried him. Matthew nodded once. I didn't do it for me. He looked at her. I did it for you. Helen's chest ached. They sat like that for a moment, two broken pieces of a once whole life, divided by glass and guilt, and the weight of love twisted by fear. Then Matthew asked, Do you hate me? Helen looked up. No, she said. She placed her palm against the glass. Slowly, gently. I hate that you had to do it. I hate that I let it get that far. I hate that I saw the signs and closed my eyes. He stared at her hand, then pressed his own against the other side of the glass. Their fingers didn't touch, but the warmth passed through anyway. I didn't know what else to do, he said again, barely above a whisper. Helen nodded. I know. That night, Helen sat in the living room, holding a framed photo of the three of them, Helen, Jack, and little Matthew, age 5, grinning in an oversized sweater. She thought about all the years in between. The tantrums, the silence, the therapy bills, the time he didn't speak for a week after seeing a dead bird in the yard. He had always felt things too deeply. And maybe, in the end, that's what made him both dangerous and decent. The DA called the next morning. There was talk of a plea deal. Second-degree manslaughter. No prior record. Mental health evaluations. Possibility of parole. Helen said she'd testify to Ryan's behavior, to the fear, the patterns, the things she had ignored but now remembered too clearly. She sat in her car afterward, engine running, staring at the steering wheel. "I did it for you." The words echoed in her head. No one had ever done something like that for her before. And she didn't know whether to feel loved or haunted. Maybe both. On Sunday, she returned to the jail. Matthew looked better. A little color in his face. Fewer shadows under his eyes. He asked her, "Do you still walk by the tree?" Helen shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe one day." She looked at him. "Maybe." Then he said, "Tell Lauren I'm sorry." "I will. And Mom." "Yes. I don't regret protecting you, even if I pay for it." Helen leaned in, her voice barely audible through the phone. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like this." He didn't answer, and neither of them hung up until the guard told them their time was over. Helen sold the house in late spring. The oak tree was still standing, tall and defiant, but its shadow felt heavier now. The backyard had grown too quiet, too full of memories packed in corners no one else could see. When the real estate agent asked if she wanted to take any of the garden stones or the iron bench with her, Helen simply shook her head. "Let it stay with the tree," she said. She moved into a small apartment 2 blocks from the coast in a town where nobody knew her name. Lincoln Beach, Oregon. A place with foggy mornings, sleepy diners, and more seagulls than people. The apartment had 1 bedroom, 1 tiny balcony, and a view of gray waves that stretched endlessly into nowhere. The building was quiet, mostly older tenants who minded their own business. That suited her fine. She didn't decorate much. Just a few framed photos, one of her and Lauren on a camping trip when Lauren was 12, and one of Matthew, age 9, drawing in the dirt with a stick. No wedding pictures. No images of Ryan. That chapter had closed. But the echo stayed. Helen's days settled into a quiet rhythm. She read novels from the library, mostly old paperbacks with worn spines and forgotten plots. She made tea in the mornings, watched the sea move in slow, lazy arcs, and sometimes baked just to fill the silence with warmth. She and Lauren spoke every other week, usually on Sundays. "How's the weather up there?" Lauren would ask. "Wet," Helen would say with a smile. There was no bitterness between them anymore. But there wasn't softness either. Just the polite exchange of 2 people who shared a past but couldn't find the present. Lauren never visited. Helen never asked her to. Every Sunday, Helen walked. Rain or shine, or more often, rain, she put on her green coat, tied her scarf, and strolled along the coast road until she reached the old white church with the crooked cross. She never went inside. Just stood across the street, watching through the stained glass as the congregation gathered. She used to love the music, the community, the feeling of belonging. Now, she wasn't sure what she believed in. God, forgiveness, time. All of them felt distant, like postcards from someone else's life. The townspeople got used to seeing her. The woman in the green coat, they called her, though never to her face. She smiled at the grocer, tipped the barista, returned her library books on time. But she didn't make new friends. She wasn't lonely, exactly. Just quieter now. One afternoon, while walking near the shore, a boy ran past her, chasing a red kite. He tripped and fell. Helen rushed to help him up. He smiled at her with missing teeth and said, "Thanks, Grandma." She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the closest thing to joy she'd had in weeks. She kept Matthew's letters in a small wooden box. He didn't write often, maybe once every 2 months. They were short, sparse, but full of love in his own quiet way. The prison library got a new book about coastal birds. You'd love it. They let me plant tomatoes. One sprouted. I dreamed about Dad last night. He looked different. Like you. Helen wrote back sometimes. Sometimes not. She didn't always know what to say, but she read every word twice. And when she missed him most, she walked to the pier and watched the fishermen clean their nets, the old ones who'd seen storms and kept on living anyway. Time didn't heal. Not really. It just layered new hours over old wounds. Like paint on a cracked wall. The cracks never vanished. They just faded from view. Helen often wondered how things might have been different. If she hadn't gone to Arizona. If she hadn't said yes. If she'd asked more questions, trusted fewer smiles, seen what Matthew had seen from the start. But life, she had learned, is not made of if. It's made of was. One rainy Sunday, a stranger joined her at the bench across from the church. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a thermos of cocoa. "Beautiful windows," the woman said. Helen nodded. "They look better from the outside." The woman smiled. I used to feel that way too. They didn't exchange names. Didn't talk about why they sat there instead of stepping inside. But when the woman stood to leave, she offered Helen a cookie from her pocket. Oatmeal raisin. Helen took it. Thank you. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the only one carrying an invisible weight. At night, Helen sometimes dreamed of the tree, but not the one in her old backyard. This one was bigger, reaching past clouds, its roots buried in stars. In her dream, Matthew stood beneath it, sketching. Younger, healthier, peaceful. She never walked to him, just watched. And when she woke, her pillow was damp, and the morning always came with a silence that wasn't quite empty, but close. She kept her green coat by the door, even in summer, because some habits stay. Like grief, like love, like memory. And every Sunday, no matter the sky, she walked. Past the bakery, past the bookstore, past the church she never entered. Not to find redemption, just to remember what it felt like to believe in something, even if only for a little while. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Helen sat down to write. The rain had softened outside, tapping the window with gentle fingers. A candle flickered on her table, next to a mug of untouched tea. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't ask for music or company. Just the sound of a pen scratching across paper. She didn't know why she started the letter. Maybe to close something. Maybe to free it. It began simply. Ryan, I don't even know if you would have read this, but I'm writing anyway. Her handwriting was slow, careful, like each word carried more weight than it used to. I did love you. I need you to know that. I loved the way you smiled at me in the kitchen, the way you touched my hand when no one was watching. I loved the version of you that you let me see. But the cost of that love was a body under the tree we were married beneath, and a son behind bars. So I have to ask, was any of it real? She paused, then continued. If you had truly loved me, you wouldn't have needed lies. You wouldn't have touched my accounts. You wouldn't have made my child feel like the only way to save me was to lose himself. But I don't regret loving you. I only regret not knowing what love was supposed to feel like. Real love doesn't come with fear. She stopped writing, folded the letter once, slipped it into a plain white envelope, unsealed, and placed it gently into the back of her dresser drawer, between old scarves and half-faded birthday cards. Then she turned off the light, stood in the darkness for a moment, and whispered into it, not to anyone, not for anyone. I'm not sorry I loved. I'm just sorry I never knew how it was supposed to feel. Have you ever mistaken love for something else? Or loved someone and paid the price in silence? If this story stirred something in you, share it. And if you're still trying to understand what love really means, you're not alone. Subscribe for more true stories where love, truth, and heartbreak collide.